How's it going, guys? In this video series we will be creating a clone of Tinder. Now, I haven't used Tinder in some time, but I have set up an account here just to have a quick look at how it works, and we can see here that we are signed in and we are loading and is searching for local matches, and on the left hand side then we have a list of users that we have matched with, and clicking on those then you can start a conversation with them. Now if I go ahead now and set up a new application, so we're basically just going to be creating the desktop version of Tinder, and the first thing we are doing here is just setting up a new application and installing the gems that we need for the application to run. And before we jump too deep into this application, I just want to remind you guys, if you enjoy this kind of content, to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And one other thing to announce is that I am planning to release a Ruby on Rails for Beginners course in the next couple of weeks. So drop me a message if you want to hear more about that, and I will probably be creating some content for that in the coming couple of weeks to promote that a little bit more. But getting back to our application, right now I'm just setting up the database. So we'll run the Rails db create command, and then we will use the db migrate command to create the schema file for our app. And then finally I am running the server so that we can see this working in the browser. And we can see that we're running Rails 6 here. Now going back to our routes file, I'm going to set up a root URL for our homepage. And we'll use a controller called public to do that. So let's set up that controller now. And in here we're going to set up a method called home. So this will be our home page, and then we will create a folder to put the view files into. So let's set up a test home view right now just to see if our URL is working. So that's looking good. And just to keep our code clean, I'm going to commit any changes we make into the Git repository. So by default, once we set up a new Rails app, Git will already be set up in that directory. So I am just removing the TurboLinks gem, as we will not be using it in this application. And then within our application template, within views, I will just remove the references to TurboLinks. And then the next step I'm going to make is using Yarn to install Bootstrap, jQuery, and Popper.js. Now these are kind of the basics that we need just to use JavaScript to select DOM elements and allow the user to interact with different things on the front end. So we'll use jQuery for that, but you can use vanilla.js or even a different front end framework if you wish. But for the purpose of this video, we will just keep it really simple and we will go with jQuery. And I'm going to paste in some code here which basically just sets up jQuery for us. So now let's just restart the server and commit the changes we've made to Git. So looking now over at the Bootstrap website, I'm going to use an example here from one of their templates and just copy the HTML. And I'm doing this just to save us some time, so we can paste in the code that they have set up already for the front end. So it's a simple HTML code to generate a layout. And I will do this within a partial called nav. And I'll put this within the layouts folder of our views. So over time we will change some of these links, but we're just trying to get a very basic looking navigation setup to begin with. So once a user is on the home page, we will show them some basic links and the option to sign up or sign in. And again, now we're just going to copy the HTML of the body. So we've got this panel sections in the middle of the page, and we will just use that on our home page. And I've also set up a new partial here for the footer. So let's create that now within the layouts folder. So we're just going to keep the basic links here that's already in place for the footer. And then for the body content, these panels, we'll move that into the home template, which is in our public folder. So let's just clean this up a little bit. So now when we reload the page, we can see that the basic content is all there. So what we can do then is start to modify this, and I will remove this third column to begin with, and then we can use the left column as a way of describing the product, basically summarizing what the service we're providing is, and then we can use the column on the right to have a link to the sign up page. So we'll just put in some dummy copy for now and try to get this looking somewhat reasonable just to start with. So now let's update this right column, and in here we're going to just say sign up, and then we will remove some of this copy in the middle, and then we will use a link. So the link will point to the sign up page. So before we get into that, we need to create user accounts, and we'll use devise gem to do that. So let's get that set up now. And you can follow the documentation for devise, but what we're trying to do here is just run the setup command, and that will create a initializer for devise where you can put in the different settings for the gem. So it gives us some information here to begin with, which is ensuring that we have the right URL options set up for the dev environment, ensuring that we have the notifications being output to our template. So we'll just go through this list, and then we will generate the views for devise. So generating the views allows us to modify the sign up page and the edit account page later. So now we'll run the generate devise command to create our model for our accounts. So we're going to use the name accounts for our model, and we're going to add a couple of fields here into this migration. So we want to record the username and the first name and the last name. So now let's run this migration, and this will create a new table for our accounts. So now we can go back to our homepage view, and we can update this code. So in this case, we're just going to have a quick message here to say click the button to get started, and then we'll generate a Rails link here, which will point to our sign up page. So now let's try this out in the browser. Let's create our first account, and we'll put some dummy details in here just to get started. And you can see here at the top we have this welcome message, but we want to modify the navigation at the top if the user is signed in. So in this case we will have a sign in link and a sign out link. And then of course we will also have a sign up link. So let's try this out in the browser and see how it looks. And we want to space these two buttons out a little bit tight right there. But it's saying we're already signed in once we click on those, any of these links right now. So when we sign up, it is automatically signing us in. And now that we are signed in, then we will want to have a conditional statement here to say that if we are signed in, then show a sign out link, and otherwise then there will be a sign in and sign up links. So let's just add that now. And one other thing to note here is that once we are signed in, we will want to have links to browse users and to go to our messages and things like that. So we'll use a link here for browse. I'll set this up as a dummy link right now, but we will add the functionality for that shortly. And I'm just going to move some of these links further down. So these will be public facing links, so we'll only see these if we are not signed in. And if the user is signed in, then we will see the browse link. So I've added a matches link, and what we will be using this for is those people that we have liked and they have liked us back. And then finally I've added a settings link here, so this will be where we edit our account settings. So I'm just spacing these links out. And then finally I will add a sign out button here to the end. So we'll just copy the sign in button and modify that one. And if you need to find out the URL for any of these devise links, you can get that using the rake routes command. And we can see here that for this sign out, we're looking for this destroy account session path, and that is for the delete method. Let's test this out, and we are signed out, and let's sign back in again. So the next thing I'm going to do is finish setting up the active storage. So we're going to use active storage to upload files for our users. So they'll be able to upload multiple photos, and then we will see them when we are browsing users. To do this, we need to open up the storage.yml file. So this is a YAML file that contains settings for our active storage. And we are going to uncomment the Amazon S3 block. So in here we will add the settings for our bucket that is on S3. And we are told here that we need to use this gem as well, the AWS SDK S3 gem. So let's add this gem to our gem file and run bundle install. So looking again at the documentation for active storage, it is telling us here that we need to add this line of code to our model. So in our case, we're going for the multiple, so we want to have multiple uploads per user account. So in our account model, then we will use this has many attached images. And in here, I'm just going to modify this, and we are using Figaro in the local environment. So I'm going to just change this to use Figaro gem. So we'll use the env syntax, and you can actually use the Rails credentials command to add and modify these variables, but just based on the way I've been doing it in previous videos, I'm just going to stick with that for now. Possibly in the upcoming app we will do it. We'll do a video on adding credentials and modifying credentials in Rails 6. So let's go ahead and restart our server again. And now we're going to create a new controller, and this will be for the browse functionality. So when we are browsing user profiles, we will be using this controller for that. So let's finish adding a new method here for browse, and we'll also add a couple of more methods here for when the user has clicked the like or dislike on a particular user, and we will probably be calling that by using Ajax later. So we'll use an Ajax request to send this like or dislike so the user doesn't have to reload the page. And now we can create a new folder here for our views or browse, and we'll just set this up as a quick template just to see if the page is working. But before we do that, we need to add a route for this browse. So we'll add a get request here for this. So we'll be using a get request, and then we'll point to the browse controller and use the browse method, and then we will name this URL as browse. So just very simple, but we can now just quickly update the link in our navigation and test this out. So once we visit this browse page, we want to be loading in accounts, and in this case we will just use all of the accounts for now, but we will want to filter this later. So now let's set up some dummy accounts, and I will do this under the database seeds file. So we will add several accounts here just to test out our browse feature. So I'll add some dummy data for these. So for this data, we are creating a first name, last name, username, and email and password. So the most important things here being the email and password, but Just having a name lets us show something on the front end too. And now that we have added this, we can run the railsdb seed command. So this will just execute this code, and we can open up the Rails console now to just double check that these entries have been made. And we can see now that we have 6 different accounts, and the last one is our dummy data. So now if we go back to this browse template, we can update the code here. So we will loop over each of the users, and we will then create we will output a paragraph with the first name. So let's test this to see if these users are being loaded correctly. So we can see here that the names are being output. However, what we will need to do is show these in a stack order, so almost like a deck of playing cards almost. So you'll show one first, and once you either like or dislike that top one, then we will see the next one underneath, and the next one underneath that, and so on. So what we could do here is actually make each of these divs unique by attaching a number to them. So just to show you how that looks, we've got user 0, user 1, user 2, and this user 0, you will notice is empty, and the reason for that is it is loading our account for this one, and we have not added a name to our account. So if we go back to our controller now, we can update this, and we'll say here that we want to not load the ID of this current account, and now you'll see that our account has disappeared. So the next thing I'm going to do here is set up a slideshow, and the reason I'm doing this is that it will just save us some time on creating the front end design for switching between users once we like or dislike a user. So I will just copy and paste this code and use it as a quick way to set this up. So we'll just follow the class here of slide, and we will use the showing class to display a slide. So the first slide will be showing. So I have removed here the index, but I think we should add a data ID attribute of this user, and we will use this ID later to make the AJAX request to the backend to say which user ID that we are liking or disliking. So this looks good so far. Underneath then we have buttons to say whether like or dislike this person. We will probably modify these later, but just adding something simple for now. So I will copy this style sheet and we'll move it into a slide style sheet. And then we will copy this JavaScript and we will add a new file under app JavaScript. So we'll add a new folder here called includes. And then we will add a require for this new file that we're going to add. So this is called this slides.js. And create the new file and paste in the code. So when we try this out on the browser, we can see that the buttons at the bottom are there. And if we have a look at the slides, let's see what's inside here. We do have the name inside, but it looks like we haven't got the showing class. So we'll just update that, and we can see that the first slide is now loaded. It's got this background color just to make it stand out for now. So let's just test our JavaScript here by running an alert, and the JavaScript is loading correctly too. So now in our JavaScript file, I'm going to run this function. So this will basically only get run once jQuery has been loaded and once the document DOM has been fully loaded. So let's run a console log here just to see if these slides are being selected correctly. So what we want to do here is select the first slide. So in this case, we're going to call this active slide, and we'll set a new variable for that, which just loads the first child element of the slides. And then we're adding a class called showing. So I'm just modifying this previous and next slide functions, as I don't think we really need them to work like the slider works. So in our case, we don't want to be sliding backwards. We want to be always going forwards, as in the sense that a user is either declined or approved. And we'll just update these IDs on these buttons just to match our intention. And what we can do here is attach a onClick event to the button, and that can be done using jQuery in this case. So we'll just say if this decline button is clicked, then we want to run this go to slide, and then we'll pass in this decline string as a variable. And then within our go to slide, we will call this action instead, this variable that gets passed in. And then we will have some code that gets run based on the condition of this action. So if the action is approved, then we'll run one piece of code, and then otherwise we'll run a different piece of code. So once the user clicks on either approve or decline for a potential match, we will want to remove the class on the active user that is displaying. So we want that user to be hidden, and then we want to select the next slide or the next account on the list, and then we will add the class of showing to that one. So kind of like a deck of cards, we're just removing the top one and then showing the next one, removing that one and showing the next one, etc. So the reason we'll use this conditional statement here for the action is if the user is approved, we want to be running a piece of Ajax code to say that that user has been matched potentially. And then if they are declined, then it will also make a different request using Ajax. So just testing this here, we can see when we click on it once, it does indeed switch to the next user. When we click it a second time, it is not working, so I'll have to look into why that is happening. So one thing we did forget to do here is we forgot to update the active slide. So in this case, once the top slide is hidden, then we want to be setting the active slide to the new one that is being displayed. So we'll update this and give this another try. So let's click this again. Emily, Melanie. Okay, so it looks like it's working this time. And again, even if you click on the no, it will go to the next user on the list. So we can just test this out again to make sure that this is being run correctly by console logging the action. So let's click yes, and that's approved. And we click no, it's declined, so that's running correctly. So the next thing we can do here is make these buttons look better. And I think what we can do for this is use Font Awesome. So if we use Font Awesome, it will give us these icons to use in place of these buttons. So we're going to use yarn to install Font Awesome, and we'll just use yarn add and then the name of the package to be installed. So that's being set up now. And we can go to our package.json to double check that the version of Font Awesome has been installed correctly. So then we can add this line of code to our application.js file. And then again in the application CSS, we will add the reference to that style sheet for all.css. And then going back to our template for this browse view, we're going to change this to not be a button in this case. So we'll change it to a span, and then we'll include this element inside. So that's normally how they do it for Font Awesome. They use this kind of markup. So I'm just following suit here. We'll add these two icons. We'll just check and see if this is working. And we can actually make these icons bigger. So there is a class for this called fa2x, which will give you double the size. So we'll apply this to both icons. So we can move these buttons inside a div, and we'll give that an ID of slide controls. So let's just clean this up, and then we can add a style to our style sheet for this. And I'm just going to move up this style, these styles here, because it looks like it is duplicated. So we'll just move it all into one place for the slide. And then we'll modify the height of this wrapping div for slides. And it looks like our navigation has been hidden here, but it's directly underneath this container. So you can use a Z index to move that to the top, but ideally we want it to be underneath the photos here for each of the users. So let's see what's happening here. And we can see here that if we disable some of these styles, that the icons will appear underneath the colored area at the top. So we will need to modify our style sheet in order to make this work. So the layout is starting to look better now. We've got the icons spaced out underneath this top area. I'm just trying to change this icon to be something more suitable. So I'm just modifying the icon for the decline button. So I want it to be a circle, as I think it will look a little bit better. And the next thing I'm going to do here is I want to get the photos in place for these users. So in order to do that, we need to finish installing active storage. So we can run this command rails active storage install, which will create a migration for our database. So we'll create two tables here, and we don't really need to change anything, but we will just run the migration to get this up and running. So the next thing we're going to do is update these links at the top. So our settings link will be the first thing we'll look at. And now going back to our navigation, I want to change the settings link to be the edit account link. So that once we go in here, we will be able to add photos for our account. So we'll need to modify the devise views in order to make that work. So what we can do here in our application controller, we will set a whitelist of the fields that we're going to use when updating the account. So in our case, we want to be able to update the first name, the last name, the username, and our images. So these are custom fields that we have added to extend devise, and we'll need to list these within the controller to make this work. I notice that when we click on this browse link that sometimes the first slide will not show, and in order to fix this, we're going to try and move this logic into the template itself and not handle it within the JavaScript. So in this case, we will output this class of showing if this loop is on the first integer or the first run through when it is being loaded on the page. So the very first user profile that is being loaded will be shown first, and everything else will be hidden. And you can see now that when I click on this browse link that it is working more effectively this time. So now within our devise edit template, so this will be what we get when we click on the settings link. So in here we are adding the ability to upload images, and we'll be doing that using active storage. So this will give us the ability to upload multiple images at once, and then we'll be outputting those to the profiles that we are browsing through. I have already saved out some images here from a stock photo website called Unsplash. So these are free images that we can use within our application. So this appears to have updated the images. So let's go back into our devise view, and we'll try to output these images within the settings page. So in this case, we will check to see if the image is available, and if it is, then we'll output the images that have been uploaded so far. So just looking at the documentation here for active storage, if we have an image, we can use this attached question mark to detect if the image has been saved and attached to that entry in our database. And if it has been attached, then we will loop over the images and output each of them as an image tag. Now in this case, I haven't really tested this code, so I'm just like writing this out as a loop initially. But in this case, we don't need this object as part of the request. So we'll just directly access those images. And in our case, we want to set a max width for this. So we just want to make them small thumbnails for now. And perhaps later we can set a custom size for a thumbnail, but for now this is fine just to get it up and running. So the next thing I want to do here is output images instead of these blank background colors that we have right now. So once we go to that browse page, we want to see the image of the user. And in our template here, I will add the image tag. So we will call user.images. And for now, we can just use the first image of this list of images. So later we will add this as a gallery that you can click through between images. But for this video, we will just focus on the first image for each user. So now we can see that this is indeed working. So off video, I did update each of these accounts with a custom image. And some of the accounts, I have multiple images per account. Now, I didn't want to waste time showing you me manually doing that for each account, but I just want to get this part of it right to begin with. So now I am going to move this image and place it as a background image on this div. And this will allow us to overlay other information such as the name of the user on top of the image. So I am setting a width and height for this image, and we will stretch the background size to cover the dimensions of the div. So we are seeing an error here, and it turns out that we can't use the asset URL for active storage. And I guess the reason for that is that we are not using it within our assets folder. So in this case, for active storage, we want to use the URL for to get that static URL for that image. So we can see that the image is center aligned and fits quite nicely within this background color area right now. But once we click on these buttons at the bottom, there is still an issue here and it is not working. And we can try to debug this by adding a console log within this on-click event for the decline and approve buttons, but that will give us an idea if the click is actually being registered. And in this case it's not, so there's something else that seems to be blocking it here. And you can see here when I click on the area underneath the photo that a username is showing up. So that seems to be blocking our buttons, and once we hide that, our buttons are now working. So what we're going to do is bring that username back in, that first name back in, but we will use styles to modify its position on the page. So I'm adding a new class here, and then I am going to position this first name. So we'll set the position to absolute, and then we'll make it 50 pixels from the bottom of this container that it is within. And in this case, we're going to use a left value of 50%, and then we'll set a negative margin to bring this content into the center. So here we can see that there is a bit of an issue with the width. Now we can update the width on this to make this fit larger names. I was going to tweak around with this to see if I can get it looking right. And if we center align the content, then it should look pretty decent right now. So let's just update this very quickly. And that's looking pretty good. We can see the username now for each of the users. So looking back at Tinder here, we can see that there is a name, an age, and it's either a job or an education or like the university that person went to, and then the distance they are underneath. So these are some details that we can add to make this better. But first of all, let's remove this colored background as it looks pretty ugly here right now. So that was used as a placeholder just for us to begin this application. So let's remove this color. And let's try to get some of these extra details added in here. So you'll probably notice here that the name is actually quite large on the front end. So that's something I want to reduce. So we'll bring the font size down for this. So let's take this out of here, and we will add it specifically on the user details class. Bring that down to 28 pixels, which is a bit better. And then let's add, we'll use a dummy age for now. We still got to figure out how to get the age of our users, but for now we'll just use a placeholder. And then underneath we want to add the education and the distance that that user is from our account, from our current location. So let's add some placeholder information here, and we'll use the font awesome icon to make this look a little bit nicer. So we'll use the map marker icon for the location, the distance of the user, and then for the job or the studies, maybe it's the university they went to, we want to use a graduation cap icon, and that's what's being used on Twitter, so I think it looks pretty good and suits the purpose of what we're trying to do pretty well. And then finally, let's try to fix the sizing and alignment of this text. So it's looking pretty large right now, so let's just have this larger text for the username and make the rest of the text smaller. And I think we can also left align this text, which will help it a little bit. And we can probably remove this small tag now. And then finally we want to fix the alignment of these icons, so the text is looking a little bit out of position here. If we can get those aligned, that should look pretty good. So that's going to do it for this video, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video, and if you have, do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you're interested in the course I will be releasing in the next couple of weeks, so I'm releasing a Ruby on Rails for Beginners course, and that's kind of an intro to the framework and how to get everything set up and use it for all the basic purposes. So it should be a pretty thorough course, and if you're interested in that, do drop a comment below regarding that. And I will also add links to the description below where you can find these courses once they are launched. But other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I will see you all in the next video.